Salutations to our fine podcast audience. Welcome to 3 Peas in a Pod, episode 234.
We made it.
That's right. Inching up into the mid 200s.
Yeah.
Who would have thought it? Not me.
Anyone who
Not
saw
me.
episode 233?
Well, no. See, I said on 233, if you don't send us a question, you got, and that's the nature of our podcast.
You never know.
We are driven by our questions that are sent to us.
Driven.
We're just propelled forward by your thoughtful, wonderful,
we do it for the
insightful
fans.
questions.
That's what we do. We do it for the fans. We do it for you guys.
Oh, yes. Those of you who are watching, listening.
The super fans. We got super
We
fans.
have super fans. So we have a question today based on, it makes reference to an Old Testament passage, but also then points us to the New Testament.
Which is a good approach.
Always.
I'm just saying that is the approach. Don't just point to the Old Testament passage. Ask us how it deals with Jesus.
There you go.
If you're just asking Old Testament questions,
Yes.
you're gonna get some dangerous answers.
That's right. So we may have to read some Bible today, y'all.
Uh-oh.
Well, that's not good for us.
So we will get into it because they ask about a particular passage and then ask a question. So the first question is, can you please explain Exodus 33, 18 through 23? So the question most people are going to have is,
What is that?
What does that say?
So here's what
And
that
I'll
is.
say, when I saw the question, I also went, okay, let me figure out what this person's talking about. Because
Well-
I know around what happens in Exodus 33, but those particular verses I did not know off the top of my head.
Which, can I just say, by the way, that is not a sign that you're an any better
No,
Christian than
no, of
anybody
course
else. I've had people walk up to me and ask me questions like, what's about, and then they throw out a verse and
Yeah.
I go, you're going to have to tell me what the verse says.
Right.
And they
seem
I should, because this is off topic, but have you seen on a lot of movies, like they'll portray the Christians or the pastors as being able to quote book, chapter, verse anytime they want to? That's not realistic.
No,
Not
honestly,
for most people.
I know very few. Well, and honestly, the people I know who do that really well, what I know is, those are your go-to ones.
Yes.
Those are the 12 to 13 that you just had.
Well, I have known people that have the whole New Testament memorized word for word.
Well, there you go.
I have known those people as well, but those are, you can
They're-
probably count them
they're-
on one hand.
They're rare exceptions.
Very rare. So, okay. So here is the passage that they were asking about. Context is Moses is up on the mountain with the Lord. This is the second time. He received the 10 Commandments, the
Correct.
law, comes down. Israel is worshiping a golden calf. He breaks the tablets.
Yes.
This is the second trip up. Him and the Lord are talking to each other. And in verse 18, which is the first verse they reference, Moses said, "Now show me your glory." And the Lord said, "I will cause all my goodness to pass in front of you, and I will proclaim my name, the Lord, in your presence. I will have mercy on whom I will have mercy. I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion. But," he said, "you cannot see my face, for no one may see me and live." Then the Lord said, "There is a place near me where you may stand on a rock. When my glory passes by, I will put you in a cleft in the rock and cover you with my hand until I have passed by. Then I will remove my hand and you will see my back, but my face must not be seen."
He's camera shy.
There you go. And the question that follows that is, why could God not be looked at, but Jesus could?
That's a good idea.
This is a theological question about the nature of God and the Trinity, and all of that, right?
Yeah.
So where do you want to start on this discussion?
I think whenever you read, and this is what I was praising you for at the beginning,
Mm.
I think whenever you read Old Testament passages, which right now I'm leading a group of people and we're just reading through the Old Testament,
Mhm.
but part of our nightly routine when we do that
Mhm.
is at the end we say, okay, where do we see Jesus in this? Or how does this help us understand Jesus in a
Mhm.
different way?
Mhm.
Because I think it's a both and. I think Jesus helps us to understand these Old Testament passages, but sometimes you understand something about the work of Jesus by seeing this, what he's up to in the Old Testament. And so I think you asking, well, here God says you can't even look at his face,
Yep.
but then people are touching Jesus. They're walking around, they know, and
Yeah.
they're able to touch his body. So what's the deal? I think that's, and I always say that when we lead through it is, and I'm not saying I don't know an answer to this, but I'll often say, I don't know the answer to your question, but you're asking the right question.
Yeah.
The question that is presupposed, which is, what is it about God that in some way
Mhm.
he is so big and so powerful that if you even got near him, he'd be like a furnace that would burn you up,
Mhm.
right? Or he'd be like the sun that would blind you.
Mhm.
But at the same way, is small enough and tender enough that you could have a meal with him. He could prepare you dinner, right? Or for Mary's case, he could be within your womb.
Mm. Yes.
That tension, I think, is the question that the incarnation
Yeah.
presupposes,
Well, and the incarnation, let's just be honest, is a form of revelation.
right?
Not the book Revelation, but
Yes.
God revealing himself
Mhm.
to us. And what Moses experienced, whatever that was, and we have no idea what that was
That's
like,
right.
was a version of God revealing himself.
Correct.
And let's also be clear, when God uses that language of, you won't see my face, you'll only see my back, I'm going to put my hand in front of you. Please understand, all of that is figurative language. God doesn't have hands, feet, and faces and all that.
Backs,
That's
none
Facts,
of those
none of
things.
that. He's using language that Moses would understand to help him see. And what I think he's doing is what you just did, Nathan, is touch on the fact of what is God's nature. And there is something in God's nature that is too much for us to be.
My mind could not contain it.
No, and I can't fully be immersed in all of God because there's something about me and there's something about God. And so God is always, that word, condescending, accommodating himself to me in order
That's
so
right.
that I can have an experience of God in ways that reveal who he is, particularly as the Apostle John said, his love,
Yeah.
because he is love.
Mhm.
He doesn't possess love. He is love. And so how does that work? How can God show himself as love to me without overwhelming me? And I
Yeah.
think what Moses experienced in that passage that we read, that's what that was. And the incarnation, Jesus, God in a body, also was doing that for us. So it is God revealing himself to us. So I'm not saying certainly not saying it's a great question, but why can we not see God and then we see God? I think that doesn't really, I think you're missing the heart of what's going on here. It's not so much of a visual seeing God,
Yeah.
like there's this, what Jesus said is himself, God is spirit.
Yeah.
So there's not just this entity sitting somewhere on a throne somewhere that I could walk up to. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Mm-hmm. I'm struggling to even come up with words because that's who God is.
Yeah.
He's not understandable.
And I think it's misunderstanding the nature of Jesus. Jesus is God,
Yeah.
but Jesus is fully human.
Mm-hmm.
And this question, I think, is overplaying the God part and
Mhm.
underplaying the human part.
Exactly.
You all know that when you first sort of pre-read the question, I said the answer is Philippians 2.
Mm.
And it's there where it says, Paul tells us that Christ emptied himself.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
He let go of all that he became fully, completely, totally human.
Yeah.
We tend to think that he was acting like he was human,
Mm.
but he was human.
Mm.
And he just showed what it was like for a human being to be totally submitted to the Father. I only do what the Father tells me to do. I only say what the Father says to say, which has been available to all human beings
Yes.
all the time.
Mhm.
Jesus just completely lived it out. And so the reason you could see Jesus was a human.
Yes.
Jesus is a human.
Is a human.
Jesus is a human.
I just heard somebody say this and it just rocked my world. I don't say we're going to get into this discussion, but I never thought of it this way. Somebody said, what does it mean, the fact that there is a human being within the Trinity?
That's right.
I
Right.
mean, that just,
Yeah, that's the.
I never
That's
sat
right.
with that
Well,
for a
Jesus
while.
did not. That's the difference, and I don't think we even talked about this last time we talked about the ascension.
Mhm.
Jesus ascending
Mhm.
means that he is still alive in a human way,
Yes.
just in a different aspect
Yeah,
of being.
and whatever.
We think often Jesus ascended, went back to a spiritual form, but Jesus ascending
His
is
body.
a form
Mhm.
that he is still in this resurrection body. somewhere.
Enough so that Stephen sees him standing at the right hand of God.
That's right.
Right.
Mhm.
Yes. It's a
Now, we don't know what the right hand of God looks like because God don't have no hand.
Yeah, well,
well, and
You
then,
know, but he means standing at the seat of power is what
Yeah.
the right hand of God means.
and just today, so in our on mission reading, then there's this other aspect, because this is what I would say too, is Jesus is the full revelation of God.
Mhm.
That doesn't mean that we understand the full revelation of God, because I don't understand the full revelation of Jesus,
Mm.
just to be clear.
Yeah.
Like, his humanness does not necessarily mean that now I get him.
Yeah.
Now I get what's going on, because then there's this moment we just read about today in our mission where, yes, he's fully human, and then he transfigures.
That's what I was going to
And
say.
then,
In
and then
the transfiguration, there is something that takes place
which is
that's almost exactly
it's supposed to be this.
it's supposed
Yes.
to be this moment on the mountain.
Because this is what I would say is, I think there's also a progressive nature to the story of the Bible, because what happens in the transfiguration, for people who don't know, Jesus takes Peter, James, and John, right? These who are kind of like the three. They're not really a core, but there are these three guys that tend to go around with Jesus more than the other ones. He takes them up to a mountain.
Well, he reveals more to them than he does the rest.
And because just before that, in this is we're reading out of Mark. This is in other ones, but this one actually begins with Mark 9 begins with a continuation of the previous story in Mark 8, where he says, "Hey, you guys, some of you are going to get to see the Son of Man come in his fullness." Then he takes them up 6 days later,
And they see it.
and he reveals himself, and we don't even know what that means, other than it says he started to glow. And it was, his clothes became whiter than anyone could ever bleach them.
Yep.
That's what it says at some point is, and that's even that, to your point, is that's this way of, they're trying to describe what I saw made no sense to me.
That's right.
And who's there with him? Moses
Yes.
and Elijah. And these two, because Elijah also is a person who God says, I'm going to make my full presence come by. And when Elijah sees it, when Elijah experiences God's presence, it's in a still small voice.
I know.
Right.
It's the opposite. He takes him up to a mountain, to a cave.
Mhm.
He hears thunder, which Jason didn't read all that, but that's in there, where the mountain has smoke coming down from it. There's fire. There's rushing wind. There's lightning, it tells us, because some people get too close to the mountain. They actually get struck by lightning and die. There's this massive storm, and God says, I'm not in any of that. I'm in the still small voice that's with Elijah. So the two people that we get this kind of experiencing the presence of God in a limited way are there with Jesus in this transfiguration. And these three fishermen, these, in their culture, unholy people, are there to see Jesus in this transfigured moment. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's even the full thing that Moses experienced, but it's supposed to call back to your memory. They went up on a mountain like Moses and Elijah did, and then Moses and Elijah are there. And
they hear them talking about the resurrection.
yes.
And they just want to stay there for a while. And then all of a sudden, they hear the voice of God say, this is my son whom I'm well pleased. And the other two guys are gone.
Yes, it's just this, it's this bizarre moment that you look at and go, okay, so something is happening here that is in Jesus that is more than what Moses experienced. And this is what Paul would eventually get to, where when Moses comes down from this mountain, he's got to veil his face because his face is shining. People can't look at him. And then Paul says, and we with unveiled faces. And he's talking about just all of us who haven't even physically seen Jesus.
We've seen his
We
glory.
can go into the glory of God. And we live with unveiled faces. It's not glowing on us like it is other people, but we somehow are experiencing it. There seems to be, and some theologians refer to it as progressive revelation, as if God's revealing little bits and pieces as he goes. Dallas Willard, I know, refers to it as progressive apprehension, or I didn't know that this was a form of that word, but it's better to say for most of us progressive comprehension.
Right.
It's not apprehension like I'm afraid of something. Right. It's apprehension is I'm apprehending or comprehending it. He would say, I believe his version of it is, God is always just revealing himself to people. But because of people's understanding of who God is, they comprehend it slowly and in different ways. And so someone like Abraham, even though he has this direct interaction with God, does not understand God in the way even that John, the apostle, does when he walks with Jesus, because Jesus says, Abraham wished he could live to see this day.
That's right.
And it's not that God goes, I'm not going to show it to you because I don't want to show it to you. It's that Abraham doesn't have this picture that someone like John has because he knows the law and the
Well,
prophets.
we're all standing on each other's shoulders. I mean,
Yes.
we all get to build on the people before us and what they understood. And I think even this picture of Moses, and I'd have to want to go back and read the whole passage. But so, it's come, they've thrown the tablets down. It's really clear God gave them the covenant that he's made with us. It's been 400 years. They haven't heard the name of God. They don't know any of that. He calls them the desert. He reestablishes the covenant he made with Abraham, said, I'm going to give you a promised land. And when Moses comes down with it, it's really clear. People ain't interested in no covenant. They already got scared and they've turned back to what they worshipped in Egypt. And Moses throws the tablets down as a symbol of this covenant is broken.
Yeah, it's done.
This is done. So when he goes back up and it's God says, okay, I will pass before you, that's a part of covenant making. It's it's cutting open, they would cut the things. He does the same thing with Abraham. He puts Abraham in a sleep and he passes in between the pieces. I think the same thing is true with Elijah and the small voice and all of that. They are in a time where the nation of Israel has turned dark, dark, dark away. And Elijah thinks he's the only prophet. Now it turns out he's not. He fights off all the prophets of Baal on a mountain. And then he's afraid for his life and he runs away. And God again passes before him again to reestablish, I am with you. And I think just before the resurrection, these three are called as witnesses again to say, hey, this is for real. This is all you've been taught, all this you're standing on. He is the Messiah like you've wondered about. He is the one. And now you get to see his glory. And so that even on the way down, they're talking about, and they say, I wonder what they meant by resurrection. Even after they've been on the mountain, what could that possibly mean? And so they come back down. But as soon as he's resurrected, they go, oh, that's what he meant.
That's right.
We couldn't even dream that that's what he meant, but that's what he meant.
Well, and then we even see going forward from that point, even into the book of Acts, which is what we've been studying, they're still understanding things about Jesus' ministry after it. They go, oh, he did like the Gentiles. I guess we're good. I guess the Gentiles are okay. I guess we missed. Oh, he really meant we could do these miracles.
That's right.
Oh, okay. I guess this, they're figuring it out as they go because they're comprehending, just like the rest of us do. And so when I look at Old Testament passages, which used to really bug me, I see lots of things and I go, ooh, that don't seem like Jesus, and which I think is the right question to have in your head, but it's not also to say, well, then this is just something else. This is just something. It's to look at it and to say, okay, Jesus seems to think all of these passages point to him. Not, well, those passages don't belong, so just take them out. They're just not there. Something else is going on. It's to say, somehow this does, and this is to be understood in the light of him.
And that you might need somebody like the Ethiopian riding in the chariot.
Yeah.
How can I understand this if nobody teaches me?
That's
I
right.
probably am not going to sit down and read it on my own like we somehow think I'm just going to crack open an 8,000-year-old piece of literature, parts of it. That's a little too old, I'm sorry. A thousands of year old piece of literature and think I'm going to understand it like the novel that got written yesterday.
Well, and I would say too, that's the importance of reading it in community. Because I'll say one of the joys for me of this group that I'm reading the book of Genesis with is as we all start to, we're just reading through these things together. And we have, I tried to do my best to set up some teaching around it, but then really every time we read it, to have conversations together, the things that other people are pulling out for me that I totally missed.
Yeah.
And they'll go, do you think this is a reference to this? And I'll go, oh my goodness, I've never seen that before. I've read commentaries on this. I went to school for this and I never saw this. Because ultimately, I believe that's what God wanted is, hey, let's all know these stories inside and out. So even what you heard us do here where we're pulling, oh, that Elijah thing. Oh, that's right. Oh, that Moses. Oh, that's right. Oh, and there's this thing. That it's so within us that we're able to pull out these understandings and it would inform now how do I go live knowing that God is nearer to me than even he was to Moses in that moment. Moses had to go up on a mountain And Moses could only see his back. And like we've already said, that's
whatever
anthropomorphized.
that means.
But
Yeah, whatever
he
it
didn't
is.
get to see the fullness. That's clearly the part that God's
That's
trying
right.
to make clear. Is whatever that means, you ain't seeing the whole thing.
Mhm.
Paul would say, we get to enter the glory of God.
Mhm.
And he's talking about that moment through prayer, through this relationship, this community of believers, through the way we live together. You are entering into the presence of God in a way that is unveiled, like Moses never got.
And Jesus said it's better
It's
Yes.
bad.
than when he was here.
That's
Even.
right.
And
He
I
said
hear
this Holy Spirit.
that's right. I hear a lot of people saying, "Oh, I just wish I lived in the time of Jesus." And there's part of me, I
get
resonate
that.
with
I
that.
get that.
I
100%.
resonate with that so much, but I do have to remember Jesus said, "It's better for you for me to go," and He breathed on them and gave them the Holy Spirit.
That's right.
That's right.
And He said, "This is where this is all going, and it's even better." And I just go, "Wow, I'm missing something if I can't trust Him in that."
Right.
And lean into that and fully believe in that too. So I need to grow in that.
That's right. I
Mhm.
think we all do. I think that's the process of all of this is we are also progressively apprehending Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
There are things I thought I understood Jesus 5 years ago or 10 years ago or 15 years ago. And now I understand, I think, more than I did. But I'm also now holding very loosely what I think I understand now is what 5 years from now I probably look and I don't know what it'll be,
Yeah.
but it'll be something that I'll go,
That's right.
whew, I didn't get that.
And
That's
that's
right.
that's why we need eternity.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right.
Because that's going to be our journey through
Yes.
eternity. Can you imagine being, 1,000 years into eternity with Christ and knowing more of Him then than you did on day one?
That's right.
And then 10,000 later, knowing even more and
That's right.
experiencing even more. And it just grows from, like the scriptures say, we go from glory to glory to glory.
Yes.
That's the same language that is in that passage that
Yep.
you referred to in
That's
Exodus.
right.
Show me your glory. Well, it's going to take a while.
Yeah.
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 That's
Yeah.
great.
That's
So,
good.
all right. Anything else on that one? I
I
didn't
think
want
it's
to cut
good.
anybody off, but I felt like we were grinding down to the end of that.
Yeah.
So, okay. All right. As always, links in the description for you to send us the questions that drive this podcast on to the next episode. So here we go. And I believe we are going to have a next episode. I believe we're going to have a next
I believe
episode.
that too.
I believe it. It'll be a great, thoughtful question coming from you guys, and we will do hopefully our best thoughtful job of answering it.
We will always do our best.
That's right.
Whatever our best in that moment
That's
is.
right. And you get to determine if that's good or not.
That's right.
Yes.
So we'll see you next week. We'll answer another question, hopefully. See you then.